Let's go live to Brussels, where NATO Secretary-General Jens Stoltenberg is addressing the media on the current Ukraine-Russia crisis. Let's listen in.
The whole time is that we know their capacity, we know the forces they have amassed, but of course we don't know with certainty their intentions. But if we combine what we know about their forces, what we know about the threatening rhetoric, they have stated clearly that if we don't meet their demands, there will be military technical consequences. And we know the track record of Russia. They have used force against Ukraine before. If you combine that, and on top of that also put the fact that they have a lot of intelligence officers operating inside Ukraine, if you combine all of that, there is reason to be seriously concerned. And that's the reason why we are conveying so clearly that if they use force, it will have a high cost for Russia. That's why NATO allies provide support to Ukraine so they can defend themselves, and also why we have increased the presence of NATO troops in the east. All of this we do to try to prevent an attack on Ukraine. So the fact that we are describing risk doesn't mean that we believe it would happen with 100% certainty. We describe that risk, that threat, also to prevent it from happening. So the main story, the main message has been the same from NATO for months. When NATO allies started in the fall, in last autumn, to describe the build-up, that was questioned. We also described the most likely plans that they will actually reach more than 100,000 troops. That was questioned. That has now happened. And now we need to prevent the next step from happening, that they're using this force against Ukraine, and that's exactly why we are doing all the things we are doing in calling on Russia to de-escalate, in also sending a clear message about the high costs they have to pay if they use force again.
Okay, we'll go to the back, the National News Agency of Ukraine. Yeah.
Dmitry Shkurko, National News Agency of Ukraine. Secretary General, according to the publicly available information coming from Ukraine, Russian troops are not withdrawing from Belarus and just maneuvering along the borders of Ukraine. So that my question is, do NATO share the Ukrainian concern that those troops could be staying in Belarus for constant base? And what would be a reaction of NATO if that happened? Thanks.
As I think what we have seen over many years now is a deterioration of the European security environment. With the illegal annexation of Crimea, with Russia's support to the separatists in Donbass, and now with the large number of combat-ready troops in and around Ukraine. And also, of course, the closer and closer integration of Russian and Belarusian forces. So that's exactly why we have reacted in the way we have in NATO. We have strengthened our presence in the east with a modest presence, with a defensive presence, with the battle groups in the eastern part of the alliance, in the Baltic countries and Poland. And that's also the reason why we now, in light of what has happened in and around Ukraine and the presence of Russian troops in Belarus, that we are now considering the next steps, including battle groups in Romania and in the southeast of the alliance. So NATO has to respond when we see aggressive actions by Russia, but we continue to strive for dialogue, for de-escalation, and we believe it is important to talk. NATO believes in diplomacy, we believe in dialogue, and therefore we continue to call on Russia to engage in good faith in dialogue with NATO.
Okay, we'll go to Imedi.
Thank you so much. Mr. Secretary-General, can you tell us more about the meeting with the defense minister from Georgia? And we are waiting also NATO-Georgia exercises in March. And the second point, Mr. Zelensky today said Ukraine is welcome to NATO, yet not all members of the alliance. How would you respond to that? Thank you so much.
So we had a good meeting with both the defense minister from Georgia and Ukraine. I think in that meeting, allies expressed very strongly their support to both countries, their territorial integrity and sovereignty. and allies provide support to Georgia and Ukraine in different ways. We do it in the NATO framework. We provide bilateral support, training, capacity building, and there will be an exercise in Georgia later on this year, and of course NATO will be part of that because it's an exercise we do together, and it demonstrates in a way how we are working closely together. The Black Sea region is of strategic importance for NATO. So what happens there matters for us. We are 3 littoral states, NATO allies that are Black Sea littoral states, and we have 2 very close partners, Georgia and Ukraine. So to work closely with them is important for us, important for the partners, and that was also clearly confirmed today. Well, also our position has not changed. The decisions made at the Bucharest summit still stands, but the focus now is on reform, is to help both Ukraine and Georgia to modernize their defense and security institutions, and we continue to focus on that.
Reuters.
Hi there, Phil Stewart from Reuters. Belarus's president said today his country could host nuclear weapons if it feels threatened by the West. What would be your response?
So, NATO is not a threat. NATO is a defensive alliance, and we have proved for more than 70 years that we are there to protect and defend, and our deterrence is there not to provoke a conflict, but to prevent the conflict. We are, of course, concerned about what we see, that Russia is modernizing its nuclear-capable missiles. They have deployed them to Kaliningrad. We have seen also Iskander missiles in Belarus. And Iskander missiles are dual-capable missiles that can also carry nuclear warheads. That's part of the pattern we see. And the reason why we are concerned, and why we have been concerned for over a long period of time, because this is a development, a pattern that has taken place over several years. One of the most important agreements NATO allies has reached and made with Russia was the INF Treaty, banning all intermediate-range weapons globally, but also in Europe. And Russia deployed new missiles violating that treaty, and of course that has undermined the security of all of us. So we are taking the necessary decisions and steps to be able to protect all allies, also in a more dangerous and unpredictable security environment, including caused by the Russian nuclear investments and modernizing capabilities.
Okay, Deutsche Welle, just behind, lady there.
Thank you. Secretary-General, could you tell us what has to happen on the ground so that NATO can state those are real signs of de-escalation? And a second question, Russia is apparently about to hand over their response to the US proposals. Are you also expecting them to send a response to your proposal as well? Thank you.
We are waiting for the response from Russia. We received from Russia in December a draft security treaty that Russia wanted to sign with NATO. We met in the NATO-Russia Council, where also this proposal was discussed. We have sent to Russia our proposals, where we actually list and go through areas like arms control, missiles, transparency of military activities, and we believe that these are topics where there is room for common ground to find solutions that will improve the security of all of us, for NATO allies and for the people of Russia. Arms control is good for all of us. It will strengthen the security for Russia and for NATO allies. So the reason why we have conveyed these proposals is that we believe that if we sit down in good faith, as we've done in the past, we can actually reach agreements which are strengthening the security of all countries, including, of course, Russia. We are waiting for the response. We have not yet received any response, but continue to believe that the NATO-Russia Council that was established by Russia and NATO allies is the best platform to engage when NATO and Russia have issues to discuss. And the NATO-Russia Council is an all-weather institution. It's even more important that we meet now when tensions are high and things are difficult, and therefore we are ready to meet. I invited Russia to a series of meetings in the NATO-Russia Council to address their concerns, our concerns, and to try to find a common way forward. Then your first question was? We have to see a real withdrawal. And of course, you have to understand that this is a build-up that has taken place over many months. And over the whole period, it's actually started last spring, we have seen the number of troops going a bit up and down. And we have seen some forces moving in and some moving out. But the trend, the net effect has been a steady increase. But you know, the fact that you're putting a battle tank on a train and move it in some direction doesn't prove withdrawal of troops. That's not the same as real de-escalation, because these capabilities are moving around all the time, in and out. So it has to be a meaningful withdrawal, a meaningful de-escalation. That is what we are waiting for. So far we have not seen that, but of course this can change. And that's exactly what we are hoping and working for, that we see that Russia actually does what they are saying, that we see a real, significant, meaningful reduction of the Russian troops in and around Ukraine.
Okay, we'll try to take two quick questions online. Fox News, Greg Palkett.
Thank you, Juana, and thank you, Mr. Secretary-General. My question is this, Secretary-General, from the latest information that you are receiving, all the reports on the Russian troop movements, does Russia...
You're watching live feeds from Belgium, where the NATO Secretary-General, Jens Stoltenberg, is addressing the media on the Ukraine-Russia crisis. He warned that Russia will face severe consequences if it invades Ukraine, and as a preventive measure, NATO has deployed troops to Ukraine to protect it from invasion.